All right, welcome back. It's the NFL Exporter live on Raw Radio. You are listening to the Exporter Sports Talk Show. Once again, the call-in number is 716-249-0552. And the email address, in case you're uncomfortable with the phone or just would prefer to use email, you want to hit up TESS, like Tom, Edward, Sam, Scissors, at rawradio1.com. All right, let's take a look at some fantasy football. You know that we got everybody ready for your leagues for the fantasy football season. I myself this week did not fare as well as I did last week. Last week I was 2-1. I'm in 3 leagues. I'm in a league in ESPN. I'm in a league in Yahoo, and then my most important league, which is my family league, the league that I'm in with pretty much all of my family members over in NFL.com. And so this week came up a little bit short in my ESPN league. Tom Brady let me down over there. I expected for him to have a big game against Minnesota. And then in my Yahoo league, guys are just not performing well. I had a couple Saints, and Marcus Colston and Brandon Cooks did not produce anything. Reggie Wayne was quiet for me over there. Matt Stafford didn't fare too well. Alfred Morris and Darren Sproles, kept things respectable, but just not enough points on the board to be able to contest there. In my NFL.com league, which again to me is my most important league, was able to get a nice victory there. Some guys who did their thing for me, Nick Foles at quarterback for Philly, DeMarco Murray, the running back for the Dallas Cowboys, also Randall Cobb, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, and I picked up the Washington Redskins defense. You remember we talked about in the preseason that a good strategy to use is as far as kickers and defenses go, you can literally each week find matchups to play and capitalize on that. The Redskins were playing at home. They were playing the worst team in the league, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have a bad offensive line. They have an unproven running back. They have some rookies at wide receiver, so definitely was a matchup that was right for the picking, and they cashed in with 19 points. I'm 2-0 in that league. In my ESPN league, I got some stunners over there. I still got Calvin Johnson, Julius Thomas, Vincent Jackson. I'm definitely loaded over there. The biggest thing that hurt me, and we're going to cover some injuries after we run through our fantasy football, running back Mark Ingram for the Saints, who had another big day. He's going to be gone probably for a month or a little bit more than that as he broke his hand. So that was unfortunate. And I'm 1-1 in that ESPN league. All right, let's take a look at our top 5 performers for each respective category and take a look at what we think with these guys moving forward. We'll also take a look at some players who are underachieving and take a look at what their future holds. Now, for the quarterback position, the top quarterback was Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers. He had 27 points. He threw for 345 yards and 3 TDs. Rodgers, we know, is an elite quarterback. He's going to continue to put up the big numbers. Our only concern with him is that offensive line. The Jets did get to him early and have him frustrated, but as we predicted in that game, there were more than enough possessions for Green Bay. And once they found their rhythm and Rodgers was able to get some time, he had no problem picking apart that inexperienced secondary of the Jets. Jay Cutler of the Chicago Bears, he's a guy we talked about in the preseason as well. Most people were able to get him in the latter round, somewhere around 9 or 10. He had 25 points, cashed in on 4 touchdowns. As long as Cutler can keep those interceptions down, he'll be just fine. He was one of the top performers last week with 349 yards, 2 touchdowns, but unfortunately had the 2 interceptions. This week kept his nose clean with no turnovers and 25 points. We talked about how these interceptions and turnovers can make a huge difference. Yeah, again, if you have Cutler, you should have a lot of good players who you drafted before him, and he's going to continue to be a mainstay. The only issue you're wondering about with Cutler is his receivers are banged up right now. Alshon Jeffrey is trying to get over a hamstring injury, which that thing can linger and flare up at any time. Brandon Marshall is trying to get his knee back right. Marshall should be better a lot sooner than Jeffrey, who again at any given time that hamstring can go haywire. How about Phillip Rivers? Did a number on the Seattle Seahawks defense this past weekend. 284 yards, 3 TDs. Nobody seen that coming. Rivers had 24 points. We talked about Rivers being another great value pick in the preseason, has a ton of weapons on offense, and especially if his tight end Antonio Gates, who has been his main target for so many years, it looks like he's back playing at a high level. That bodes well for Rivers. He should be a guy that should be able to build a lot of confidence in that offense overall after this win here. So you like Phillip Rivers moving forward. Peyton Manning, he's Mr. Automatic, 250 yards, 3 TDs. He'll get you that with his eyes closed. He had 252 and 3 TDs this past week and a smooth 21 points for him. You start him every single week. I think what's interesting is this week is the big game against Seattle. That game is in Seattle. And so, that might be a situation where you look for another option. But we're going to see what type of professional Manning and that entire Broncos offense is. I'll wait to elaborate on that one a little bit more. And then we have 5 players who were tied with 18 points apiece. That being Cam Newton. He had a great return for the Carolina Panthers. Kirk Cousins for the Washington Redskins stepped in, 250 yards, 2 TDs. And Andrew Luck only put up 172 passing yards, but was able to capitalize on 3 passing TDs as well. Darren Sproles, the running back for the Philadelphia Eagles, led the way with 23 big points. He had 7 catches for 152 yards, also had a rushing touchdown. Man, this guy has been big for Philadelphia. If it wasn't for him, running back LaShawn McCoy said that the Eagles would be in a ton of trouble. Sproles has performed at a very high level the first 2 weeks, and he is the leading fantasy running back for week number 2. Coming in behind him, you have Giovanni Bernard of the Cincinnati Bengals. Had a big day against the Atlanta Falcons, putting up 169 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. Next, you had 2 players with 21 points. We're talking about Niles Davis for the Kansas City Chiefs and Ahmad Bradshaw for the Indianapolis Colts, who got a couple extra points tagged onto him for being a running back and getting some receiving touchdowns. Then we had 3 players tied with 20 points. Arian Foster of the Houston Texans, DeMarco Murray of the Dallas Cowboys, and Alfred Morris of the Washington Redskins. All of those guys came out and had big games. And then rounding out our top 5 is Bobby Rainey. He filled in this past week for Doug Martin out in Tampa Bay. Martin sat out with a knee injury. Rainey cashed in with 144 rushing yards. Did an excellent job. At the wide receiver position, the top receiver this week was Jordy Nelson of the Green Bay Packers. Nelson hauled in 7 catches for 209 yards, had an 80-yard touchdown catch from Aaron Rodgers. Man, this guy is one of the most exciting and best players in the NFL. Was not able to get my hands on this guy in drafts. He's someone I had really high up on my board. Just continues to put up the big numbers year after year. I'm going to have to do what I have to do next year to get Jordy Nelson. This guy's an absolute stud. Coming in second was Brandon Marshall of the Chicago Bears. Did not do a lot of work yardage-wise with only 48 receiving yards, but had 3 big touchdown catches. He cashed in with 22 points. Randall Cobb and Sammy Watkins, the rookie from the Buffalo Bills, both had 17 points. Cobb is the other half of that dynamic duo out in Green Bay. And then we had 2 players, being Dez Bryant of the Cowboys and Mohamed Sanu for the Cincinnati Bengals. Both of those guys had 16 points. Moving over to our tight ends, we talked about it. Antonio Gates of the San Diego Chargers. Gates had 27 points. He had 96 receiving yards, and all 3 of Phillip Rivers' touchdown passes went to Gates. Looked absolutely spectacular out there. If you're going to try to attack Seattle's secondary, their linebackers and your safeties seem to be your best bet, and Gates was able to do exactly that. Just played an outstanding game. When we take a look, next in line, we have Jimmy Graham of the New Orleans Saints. He cashed in with 23 points. Delaney Walker, He was one of the guys that we advised you pick up off the free agent wire last week. Came out and had 142 receiving yards and a touchdown. How about Niles Paul? Stepped in and did a great job for Jordan Reed, the starting tight end for the Washington Redskins, who's out with an injury. Paul had 15 points. But how about the veteran out in Baltimore? Owen Daniels hauled in 2 TD catches. He only had 20 yards, but it's all about getting in the end zone. He had 14 points. When we take a look at our defenses, the number 1 defense for week 2 in fantasy football for the NFL was the New England Patriots. They had 27 points. These guys racked up 6 sacks, had 4 interceptions, blocked the field goal, and ran it back for a touchdown. So the Patriots got back on track as they plastered the Vikings minus Adrian Peterson out in Minnesota. How about the Buffalo Bills? They got a big kickoff return from running back C.J. Spiller to help them get 21 points. The Washington Redskins, I spoke on them a minute ago, were able to record a franchise record 10 sacks to help them get 18 points. The Arizona Cardinals got a big punt return from Ted Ginn Jr. to help them get 17 points. And that Panthers defense out in Carolina continues to be nasty, led by Luke Kelce, forced 3 turnovers and had 13 points. And then when we take a look at our kickers, we're talking about Dan Bailey of the Dallas Cowboys. He had 19 points. Dan Carpenter of the Buffalo Bills had 16. Nick Novak of the San Diego Chargers had 15. And then we had 4 players tied with 14, that being Stephen Gostkowski of the New England Patriots, Justin Tucker of the Baltimore Ravens, Greg Zuerlein for the St. Louis Rams, and Chandler Catanzaro for the Arizona Cardinals. Rounding out our top 5 was Matt Crosby with 13 points. He's the kicker for the Green Bay Packers. Now let's take a look at our players who underachieved in week number 2. At quarterback, Drew Brees, only 15 points. That is not what we're accustomed to seeing him produce, and he was picked in most fantasy leagues in round 2 or 3. You expect 20 points a week from him. Andy Dalton is without some weapons. Nonetheless, he only stepped in with 14 points. Matt Stafford had Calvin Johnson drop a touchdown on him that could have helped him his numbers out. Nonetheless, he only had 13 points. Tony Romo continues to underachieve with only 11 points. Colin Kaepernick had 4 costly turnovers that put a huge hit on his numbers. He had 11 points. And then Tom Brady has continued to underachieve, only 9 points in the first 2 games of the season. Brady hasn't even managed to get over 12 points, and Matty Ice was cooled off out in Cincinnati after putting up a league high for fantasy football last week, 33 points. He only had 9. At the running back position, Monty Ball for the Denver Broncos got to do a better job with his goal line carries, only had 8 points. Eddie Lacy continues to disappoint, although he had 2 tough matchups. He only had 5 points. Shane Vereen should have had a big day out with New England, but he was handcuffed to Tom Brady in that passing game that didn't do much. He had 4 points. Matt Forte, it wasn't a good matchup for him against San Francisco, but he only had 3 points. Reggie Bush continues to struggle out in Detroit. He only had 2 points. And then Jamal Charles as well as Noshawn Moreno went down with injuries early in the first quarter of their games. Both of those guys are going to miss some time. They had 0 points. I talked about Calvin Johnson. Yes, he had 8 points, but he dropped a touchdown. Unacceptable. His numbers should have been much higher. Percy Harvin got away with one as he stepped out of bounds on a touchdown run, so his numbers should have been much lower than the 8 points that he had. Vincent Jackson and Larry Fitzgerald continue to disappoint. Both of those guys only had 5 points. And then Roddy White only had 4. And rookie Kelvin Benjamin, against a very weak secondary out in Detroit, only had 4 points. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll wrap up our duds from fantasy football. for our tight ends, our kickers, and defenses. And then we'll go ahead and hit the injury report and start taking a look at the games coming up for Week 3 in the NFL. Once again, it's the NFL Exporter live on Raw Radio. We'll be back in 1 second.